Joining us now is Afghan journalist Ali Latifi. He was previously in Afghanistan. He's joining us now from Istanbul. He's here to discuss the Biden administration's seizure of Afghan central bank assets. Ali, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's put this up there on the screen. This was an extraordinary decision here made by President Joe Biden, that Biden will be spurning a demand by the Taliban, splitting $7 billion in frozen Afghan funds of the central bank's assets between the victims of September 11 and then also to humanitarian causes. Now, as a journalist, as an Afghan yourself, can you break this down and make our audience of Americans understand whose money actually was this?
So this was literally the assets of the central bank of Afghanistan. So this wasn't just money. This was gold. This was other valuables that they sent to the Federal Reserve for this very reason, because they were afraid. First of all, the Afghan government of the last 20 years, which the U.S. supported wholeheartedly, was full of corruption and fraud. So there was fears that it would be stolen. There was always a fear of a potential Taliban takeover and how they would use that money. So for those reasons, the money and the assets was sent to the U.S. Federal Reserve. Another $2 billion is in other foreign banks. But this is money that belongs to the people of Afghanistan. You know, this is money that should be feeding the banking system in Afghanistan. At least $500 million of it is literally people's bank deposits that, you know, federal reserves and central banks, they keep this money, right? They don't all stay in the physical bank. At least $500 million of that is literally the savings of poor Afghan men and women, you know, who have been working and scrimping and saving over the last 20 years. And the Biden administration's whole flawed logic to all of this is basically that, well, this money is a result of our foreign investment. You know, our occupation made it possible. We gave foreign aid. We created business opportunities, so on and so forth. So for that reason, it's not really the money of the people of Afghanistan, which is an incredibly unfair, short-sighted, and incorrect reading of the situation. Because right now, if you are in Afghanistan, there is an enormous cash shortage to the point where if you need to get cash out right now, you can get between $200 and $400 a week out of the bank. And when you do that, you have to stand outside the bank, you know, maybe for several hours in a day or several days back and forth, you know, like several days back to back. You know, I was speaking to people who would line up outside a bank, say at like 4 a.m., and by noon, the bank would be out of money and they would have to come back the next day. And they had been doing this repeatedly for 3-4 days at a time. And again, if you're talking about $200 to $400 a week, you have to remember that you're talking about people that have families of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people living in one house. And so, you know, with that immediate money, what are they doing? They're paying their back rent. They're buying groceries, they're paying school fees, they're paying, you know, mobile phone credit, all these basic sort of supplies, so that all these basic expenses, so that basically within the end of that week, you're out of that money again. So you're just repeating this process all over again, week after week, hoping that you can get that. I mean, I lived above 2 banks, you know, the last place I lived in Kabul. And at a certain point, I had to get $1,000 from Western Union. Whereas in the past, it would take me maybe 20 minutes. This time it took me 4 days. Wow. Because literally, you would line up outside the bank. You know, I would walk downstairs and they would say the money from the central bank. So the central bank would send physical cash, right? Hasn't arrived yet. Once it arrives, we'll start handing out the money. And as soon as it's gone for the day.
So
you know, so you could... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Tell me if this is an accurate way of characterizing it. Our actions here and what I would describe as theft is basically causing a banking collapse in the country, and which is helping to fuel a devastating humanitarian crisis. If you could, you know, first of all, is that the right way of thinking about it? And second of all, talk to us about that humanitarian crisis and what day-to-day life looks like right now for millions of your people.
So you're right. It's essentially, you know, because that comes with sanctions. So part of the sanctions is keeping that money and not letting it back into the bank, so that even people who have money are not able to take out their money, right? They don't have access to physical money. And then the other part is that aid is being cut back greatly, because their whole fear is, well, what if the Taliban take the aid money? What if there's corruption? What if there's fraud? Which there's a very high likelihood because the former republic was highly fraudulent and corrupt. But if that wasn't as much of an issue back then, why is it so much of an issue now to you? You've had 6 months to figure out other ways to get this money out there and to make sure that people have the basic necessities to go on with their lives. Because this is what I've been saying repeatedly, is that during this occupation, the economy in Afghanistan was never set up in a way to be self-sufficient. Right now, going back to the humanitarian issue, hospitals are out of basic supplies. They're out of anesthesia, they're out of needles, they're out of bandaging equipment, any kind of basic things that you need. They all either came from, say, like foreign aid organizations, or they had to be imported in and bought. And then you have hospitals and schools where the staff aren't being paid, and they're essentially just working for free until a point where they can get paid, in public institutions. In some places, they're being paid a fraction of what they used to be paid, maybe 25%, maybe 30% of what they used to be paid. So in terms of the humanitarian situation, yes, you have people who are always hungry and starving because, unfortunately, the system in Afghanistan was never set up in a way to take care of the poor. Right. But now now it's expanded to the point where people who are relatively stable, who had, say, office jobs, who worked for the government, who worked in private schools or private clinics, they are no longer either the places they worked have shut down because there's no more money, or they're not getting paid what they used to get paid. So now even those people that lived relatively comfortable lives, they are also now going day to day and wondering, how they will pay for themselves over the next few months.
This is very important. Yeah. And, Ali, I believe it was you who pointed out, not a single Afghan was actually involved with 9/11.
Exactly.
I mean, Look, there's a much better argument for seizing a whole lot of Saudi Arabian assets. There's some right here in D.C. They've got some nice banks and a nice embassy over there. I'm full of gold. We could go take it tomorrow to compensate. Go ahead.
and this is what makes so many people in Afghanistan angry, is that no Afghan had anything to do with the 9/11 attack. And the average person living in Afghanistan in 2001, you have to remember this was the first time the Taliban ruled for 5 years. The average person in Afghanistan at that time had no idea what the Taliban government was doing. They didn't know that they were harboring Osama bin Laden. They didn't even know who Osama bin Laden was. They didn't, they might have heard Al-Qaeda from the news, but there was no television. So if it played on the radio, because the Taliban had banned television then, but if it played on the radio, maybe they might have by chance heard that Al-Qaeda staged an attack somewhere, but that's about it. It's not as if the average person in Afghanistan actively supported Al-Qaeda or actively supported and welcomed Osama bin Laden. I mean, to be quite honest, even the average Taliban, government members and fighters in 2001 probably didn't even know who bin Laden was or what he was plotting. So again, you're going after an extremely poor nation, a nation that had suffered because of, after 9/11, to drone strikes, to night raids, to abuses by many different foreign forces. I mean, we all remember Robert Bales in 2013, if I remember correctly. He went in the middle of the night into a village in Kandahar and just started killing civilians.
Yeah.
So, Afghanistan has consistently been suffering since 9/11, even though it had nothing to do with it. And, some people will say, oh, well, the Taliban government allowed bin Laden to stay. But that's a government decision, and that was a pariah state anyways. It's not as if the average person in Afghanistan cast a ballot for them or was necessarily accepting and welcoming of them. I mean, think of, so are people in Detroit going hungry because of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Right. Well, that's a good
which in that case the U.S. had a direct hand in, the hand in,
Right.
Or it's as if saying we're going to punish Guatemala for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's what's happening right now.
Ali, I know you're a journalist, so you don't necessarily want to put yourself at the center of the story, but I just wonder if you could talk to us about how our actions in your country have shaped your life.
So I grew up in the United States, right? So I was born in Kabul, and I grew up in the U.S. So I'm old enough to remember the end of the Soviet occupation, and then I went back for the first time in 2011, and I was living there until this year from 2013 on. And in my eyes, even back then, what I saw was that none of these systems throughout this occupation were set up to be sustainable. They were never set up to put Afghanistan on its feet. If we go back to sort of the ideas of corruption, Biden when he was vice president, Obama when he was president, Bush, Trump, all of these people knew that the Afghan government was corrupt. Never really made them pay for anything. Never really held them accountable. And when Obama first sent the Taliban to Doha in 2011, he never really forced anyone to go and sit down with them. There were secret meetings, behind closed doors. And then when Trump started his in 2018, his negotiations, he never really put real pressure on the Afghan government. He didn't include them to begin with. But when it got closer, he didn't put any real pressure on either side to take this peace process seriously. And when Biden finally announced his withdrawal, it's not as if the Afghan people were asking the U.S. to stay. They were sick of it. They were fed up with it. But what everyone is upset by is that there was no conditions. There was no plan. And you're seeing this over and over and over again. Look at what Biden keeps saying. He's saying, you can spend 100 years and you'll never unite Afghanistan. He's speaking about the country in a very dismissive manner. And if you look back, he told Hamid Karzai that Pakistan is more important to us than Afghanistan ever will be. He called part of the Kannar Valley, which is one of the most beautiful parts of the country, hell on earth. He even this, again, if he had like half a brain, he would say Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11. Right. He's not taking his responsibility seriously. He withdrew, fine, but you have to withdraw properly, and you have to follow up on that withdrawal.
Right. He's
failed on both accounts.
Were you surprised how quickly the government just completely collapsed?
Yes, absolutely. Because I was in June, July, I was doing interviews like this, and all these TV stations were saying, within 30 days, Kabul will fall. I was like, no, you're kidding. There's no way, what changed everything was I think it was August 13th when the cities of Herat and Kandahar fell, the second and third biggest city in the country. I knew then that it was over, And again, this is the other thing, is the U.S. was there for all of this. They were there when districts were falling throughout the summer. They were there when provinces were falling from August 4th to the 15th. And they were there from the 15th to the 31st, the end of the occupation. So it's not as if the Taliban takeover surprised them at all. They knew this was coming. Their own intelligence was telling everyone it's going to happen in 30 days, in 60 days, in 90 days. So again, why was the immediate reaction, we're going to cut off all funding? We're going to starve the people.
No,
How many people have already left the country, and what do you see as some of the potential follow-on impacts in the surrounding region?
So it's estimated that 100,000 people have left so far. It's hard to know exactly how many of them were actually all Afghan, but let's say 100,000. Those were among some of the most educated, some of the most talented people who spoke multiple languages, who had academic knowledge, who had professional knowledge. They're all like for instance, the media, right? The thing I know the most about. The Afghan media is essentially decimated right now. There is very little, homegrown Afghan media still operating in Afghanistan at this moment. Even though that was like the one thing that in the last 20 years really was something that flourished. It was the first time in our history that we had a real free press. We had women's rights and things like that in the past, but we never had a real free press until the last 20 years. And now that's being diminished completely.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, Ali, I really appreciate you coming on and outlining this, speaking actually as an Afghan yourself and for the Afghan people. It's a perspective that doesn't seem to exist in our national media. And look, we've been used as pawns for 20 years. I think this is just a latest, clearest example. We thank you for joining us and for your own personal bravery in this. Thank you.
Yeah, keep us updated, so Ali. Great to meet you.
Yeah, we'll have you back on, Ali, to keep us updated. Thanks very much. Stay safe. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. The Rogan story, we talked about it earlier. Some people are sick of hearing about it. We're frankly sick of talking about it. But the reason why that we cover it and frame it in the way that we do is we see it as the attack that it is. And, I was thinking this weekend a lot. And I was like, wow, last week was our biggest week ever for the show. It was also the week where we weren't able to just post on YouTube. We don't know why. They haven't given us an example or a reason for why. It was 4 hours that our account was basically disabled. And it was like in those moments, you're like, wow, this is how much control they have over us. And this isn't just about YouTube. This is about the entire centralized system. They can disappear you in a second. So look, this is why we have the system set up the way that we do with the premium subscription and all of that. And I'm very thankful for it every day, because you can have the biggest day ever, but you can also be very much at their whims. I don't want to live that way. Krystal, I know you don't either. And I don't think a lot of you want media to act that way. So that's why we have it designed. And we appreciate everybody who stood up for us.
Yeah, we really, really do. We love you guys. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes. And happy birthday, Mom.
Yeah. Right. Happy birthday to my little Ida Rose. They share a birthday.
I know, it's kind of cool.
Today. We love you guys so much. You guys are our Valentines really every day.
Right.
You come through for us. So thank you. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.